This is The Toss-Up, where we take a look at some of the topics facing the world of sports and give a little bit of the history behind some of them. We're not trying to change your mind. We just want to dive deeper into the topics that keep you tuned in to the teams you love. Brian Hoyer, Josh McCown, Scott Tolzien, Tom Savage, and no, these aren't the members of a new boy band that's about to make it to the Final Four of America's Got Talent. These are real men who started at quarterback in the NFL last Sunday. And we were this close to getting a guy named Nathan Peterman to start for the Bills. My guess is 95% of football fans outside of the University of Pittsburgh have never heard of him. I know I hadn't before this past weekend. You know, for being the league that's supposed to harbor the most elite athletes football has to offer, there sure seems to be a lack of elite talent at the quarterback position. See, when I think of the top gunslingers in the National Football League, I think of guys like Brady, Rodgers, Brees, and there are many fans who can make a case for Russell Wilson or Eli Manning to be mentioned in the upper echelon of signal callers, or even Andrew Luck, if he can ever stay healthy. But outside of this core group, there's a small drop-off that continues to get steeper and steeper and steeper, and then you get to Scott Tolzien's level. So it begs the question, where are all the elite quarterbacks? And that's our topic today here on The Toss-Up, and we get joined by our beautiful-looking panel, that I might say. Here to my left, we have Josh Eastern, IDS Soccer beat reporter, Zan Piarli, IUS TV basketball beat reporter, and then Eddie Cotton, co-director of sports at WIUX. Gentlemen, where are all the elite quarterbacks? Josh, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think there's almost kind of like a tier system these days, and it's you have those top three quarterbacks, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees, and after that, it's just kind of a mishmash of different guys who haven't really reached that top level yet, but still could be considered maybe. Is Joe Flacco elite? That's the ever-asking question that everybody seems to be debating, but it's a relevant argument. Where are all these other quarterbacks? And I guess it's kind of an interesting question. That's why we're talking about it right now. Yeah, and I guess you bring up the fact, is Joe Flacco elite? But that really just begs, what makes a quarterback elite? Eddie, I know that you have some opinions on this.
Personally, I look at rings immediately. You have to look at what you've accomplished, what you've done, and what you can do for a franchise. And we looked at only those three names in your monologue to start: Brees, Brady, Rodgers. Those are the only three names that really come out there and say, we're going to be with this franchise for at least 10 years, and we're going to lead them to greatness almost every year. And there's just this gap and lack of talent throughout the NFL at the quarterback position that's concerning for the future of the league, because if you're going to maintain a league based on this most important position, how are you going to do it with nothing out there?
Yeah, I agree with that, Eddie. And I think, going back to Josh's point, there is a little bit of a tier system. I think you have Brady, Brees, and Rodgers as, your elite quarterbacks. And then you have a couple of guys that are really good, such as Russell Wilson, Eli Manning, Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, guys like that. But then you can build around guys that are sort of your franchise quarterbacks that might not be the best talent level, but they're able to run an NFL playbook, run a team, be able to make all their reads whenever it comes down to it. And then there's those guys like Scott Tolzien that you were saying that are just bad. But now you see a situation with Scott Tolzien. He is the backup in Indy to Andrew Luck. So a little bit of an unfortunate situation right there for the Colts.
Well, do we consider Andrew Luck as an elite quarterback because he's paid like an elite quarterback? What, his contract was for about $140 million or something like that? But he keeps getting hurt, and it's just he can never stay on the field. But the thing that might make him stand out as an elite quarterback is, you see what the Colts are doing this year. In their first game, they get blown out by the Los Angeles Rams. Do you think that because a quarterback misses time, all right, let me take it back to the season when Peyton Manning missed for the Colts. They ended up winning, I think, 2 games that year. What makes an elite quarterback like that? Do you think that makes Peyton Manning elite? Do you think that because the Colts are bad without Andrew Luck, that makes him an elite quarterback? Is he in that upper echelon right now?
Well, it kind of goes back to that argument of most valuable player. That's when you judge, or that's when you can really judge from the outside looking in whether these guys are elite quarterbacks. And going to Peyton Manning, I think he probably was an elite quarterback before he got injured nonetheless. But Andrew Luck, that's a tough situation because they paid him so much money and they couldn't really build a team around him. And I think that hurts him in the argument of elite quarterbacks. Because you talk about those top three, Rodgers, Brady, and Brees, they all have a Super Bowl. And is Andrew Luck ever going to get there with the team he's on and the contract he's being paid? It's tough to say.
But you mentioned that, and then you can look around at the league, and you looking at value specifically. There's a bunch of quarterbacks that if you were to get rid of them, their teams would be absolutely trash. You look at Matthew Stafford, the Lions without Stafford are terrible, but does that make Stafford elite? No. He just has an elite contract because we're in this point where there's a quarterback bullet surrounded, quarterback bubble in regards to contracts. Sorry, that slipped me up a bit because it's such a complicated process. There's this bubble around the quarterback contracts because there's such little talent that you need to keep these guys that are just average. So you could easily label Andrew Luck as average.
Yeah, and then you bring up Matthew Stafford, which I think is a good point because we were talking about this. He seems like he's that kind of quarterback where it's like the Detroit Lions are kind of stuck in that quarterback purgatory. So they need to sign a guy who they know can play in the NFL, but he's not going to really make that jump. Matthew Stafford, I think he's 0-1 in the playoffs in his career. He can't get up there. So, I mean, do you think that that's a problem, that teams feel the need to overpay for a quarterback that they have right now that they know can play, but they're not elite?
I think that is an issue because especially, I mean, where do teams go to get quarterbacks? They look to the NFL draft, and not that many quarterbacks are found in the draft, really. I mean, you have this past year, you have Mitchell Trubisky, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, all taken in the first round, Deshaun Kaiser in the second round. After that, there's really a big drop-off, you know, in terms of quarterbacks, and every single year in the NFL draft, too. I mean, think back to the draft with Jameis Winston going number 1 and Marcus Mariota going number 2. No one else in that draft was really notable. And then Trevor Siemian, who's now the quarterback of the Denver Broncos, who's picked in the 7th round. So I guess the Broncos found a gem there. But, I mean, if you have a quarterback that can run the system and get you contending every single year like Matthew Stafford is, I think you do need to pay him the money so he's able to stick around and be with that team. Because if you don't pay him, someone else might give him that contract when he becomes a free agent.
And when you look at those top quarterbacks, Brady and Aaron Rodgers, I think those are kind of the top two. They all had a few years to kind of mature behind a quarterback before them. It was Drew Bledsoe for Tom Brady. He got injured, and Brady took over. For Aaron Rodgers, it was Brett Favre. So they had a time to learn behind those guys, mature, learn the system, learn the cadence. That was a big thing with Jared Goff and why it took him 10 or so weeks to get into the starting lineup. He didn't have that much time to learn, but those other guys, they sat back there for a few years. That's why Brock Osweiler was supposed to be kind of the next big thing. It's not really turning out that way.
But you know why these quarterbacks have to sit back there and wait? Because we're not training quarterbacks properly at the college level. You're looking around at Division I football, and it's all these spread offenses that are based on just spreading and trying to get the best athletes the ball as possible. And you're looking at the draft, and guys that played on teams like at Cal, Jared Goff, Cal was not competitive in any way, but they ran a pro-style system. So the issue is there's so many programs out there not training quarterbacks to refill the draft with talent.
Yeah, I agree with Eddie right there. I mean, you look at Alabama, they're number 1 every single year. When has an Alabama quarterback ever done anything in the NFL? I mean, I go back and I think about Greg McElroy and A.J. McCarron, and I think those are the last 2 guys that are even drafted out.
McElroy's in the booth now for
Yeah,
ESPN.
exactly.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's just these guys, college football is all about getting the athletes the ball, being fast, you know, being able to control, outrunning every single person, where in the NFL you actually have a system, you have to check down, you have to actually read coverages, and it's a lot more, the skill set is a lot higher. Everybody's up playing a little bit more, and I mean, in college you have, 130 Division I FBS programs. I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks out there, and not all of them are fit for the NFL.
Yeah, and talking about those spread offenses, it also hurts those quarterbacks when these offensive linemen that are coming up through the draft are not ready for the NFL. They're a lot smaller because they have to keep up with that spread offense that's trying to run 100 plays a game like you see with Indiana or Oregon a few years ago. These offensive linemen are not ready for these big-bodied guys of the NFL, and that hurts the quarterbacks, and that's why you're seeing guys like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Kaiser, Deshaun Watson, who are all running quarterbacks and can move around the pocket because that's what you need these days with pretty poor offensive linemen.
Well, and do you think we're going to see more of that in the NFL in the future? Like, is that going to be the next tier of elite quarterbacks? Because you mentioned Russell Wilson. He can probably be in that top 5 conversation right now. And then, you have the potential of Kaiser. You have those other guys that can run. Jameis Winston a little bit, Mariota, he's mobile. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the college game is going to move to the NFL a little bit more with their quarterbacks? Are we going to see more mobile elite quarterbacks in the NFL?
I think that's kind of the way it's going right now. I mean, you see Alabama, they're the best team in college football right now. Jalen Hurts, he's a mobile quarterback. Now, I know you mentioned an Alabama quarterback hasn't been drafted in a while, and maybe these kind of old school coaches want those kind of old school quarterbacks that can just sit in the pocket and pass. But you see these kind of new coaches coming through. I think the Rams coach is in his young 30s.
31.
Yeah, he's 31. So there's kind of these new football minds coming through that maybe we're going to see a change to that Mike Holmgren West Coast offense where you sit in the pocket and you pass.
But to counter that, you've looked at teams that have started to try and make that change, and you stare directly at Robert Griffin III, the face of change in the league, the future of this spread offense in the NFL, and then 2 years later, his legs don't work. So injuries are more prevalent in the NFL when you have these scrambling quarterbacks because the defenses are bigger, stronger, and faster. Really, what needs to change is the college football level, and I don't think that's feasible.
Yeah, I agree with Eddie. I don't think that the NFL style will change to these mobile quarterbacks because I feel like we've been talking about this for the last couple of years. And yeah, you do get a guy like Marcus Mariota who wins the Heisman at Oregon and is a starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans now. And he's really a good quarterback, an NFL pro-style quarterback who is mobile. I think we will see some guys like that. Mariota is kind of like the poster boy, I feel like, for this new era. But he has the qualities where he's able to sit back in the pocket and still pass. And I feel like that is huge at the NFL level, especially talking about guys like Robert Griffin III. All they can do is scramble. Johnny Manziel, another big one. Where's he at right now? Not in the league.
Yeah, who knows what Johnny Manziel's doing right now. But, I think we all agree that it's like Brady, Rodgers, Breeze. Those are the top three. And then we mentioned guys like Russell Wilson who could end up stepping up into one of those elite roles. And then maybe the future is going to be Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. I guess we don't know, but right now we know where the stance of NFL elite quarterbacks are, and there's just really not many. So right now we're going to go ahead and take a little short break. But when we come back, we're going to discuss one of my favorite topics and arguably the best season of the year, fantasy football season. Going to talk about what we saw last week and what to expect for the season going forward. So stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up, and after discussing the current quarterback situation in the NFL and all that mumbo-jumbo, it's time to shift gears to a much more important topic, fantasy football. The best of the 5 seasons in the most exciting time of the year, at least for me, that is. So I know that we all play fantasy football. We're on a league together. You know?
True.
We are.
Yeah, yeah, we're on a league. It's competing like that. But, what are some of the reasons why you guys play fantasy football? I guess first I should ask, do you actually enjoy playing fantasy football? Does anyone oppose it?
To a certain extent, I enjoy it because it's kind of fun to maybe root for other players when you're watching NFL Red Zone on a Sunday. But I have, unfortunately, at least to me, I have 3 teams, all with different people. So it's tough to kind of track all these guys, but at the same time, it's fun because you get your competitive juices flowing.
Yeah, I honestly hate fantasy football. I'm going to be real here. It's nothing against it. I do enjoy keeping track of my players, but whenever they have a poor outing, and it kind of sucks. It really does because you expect these guys last week, I'll give an example. I had Le'Veon Bell and Rob Gronkowski in my starting lineup. Both those guys had really subpar outings, really subpar weeks.
Yeah, I got the same 2 guys.
Yeah,
starting
probably.
So I feel you.
Yeah, definitely the reason why I lost last week. But I am in 3 leagues like Josh is. One of them is a little bit more competitive. There's money on the line. I keep up with it a little bit more. But the other 2 are just for fun. I enjoy it because I'm in a league with some of my friends from back home. So it's kind of nice, earning bragging rights over those guys.
See, I hate it with everything in me, from my toes to my hands to my head. And yet I still do it because everyone does it, and that's the issue. With me, fantasy football used to be this fun little thing until it gets to the point where we've got guys like Josh who have 3 teams. I turn on the TV, and there's hour-long fantasy football shows every day, and people are freaking out and telling me who's on their team and what their performances are. I don't care. I just want to watch football, and that's all that matters to me. But I'm in it, and I'm doing fantasy football because that's what all my friends do.
See, that just hurts my feelings because fantasy football, it's one of the best times of the year for me. I just love playing all fantasy sports. I'm not really a fantasy baseball kind of guy. I try to do it every year, but I can't really delve into that. I know you're a big fantasy baseball guy. You're big into that. But yeah, that's not really my thing. But since we all pay attention to it, we all at least know a little bit of what's going on. Let's talk about some of the early stuff that we've seen going on in fantasy football in week 1. So Zan, you mentioned Le'Veon Bell and Rob Gronkowski complete duds. But then we saw some other guys step up in big situations. Going back to the quarterbacks, you had Sam Bradford, Jared Goff, guys like that who had good situations. Do you think that we're going to see that throughout the rest of the year? Or is that just going to be a one-week thing? I guess like Jared Goff, do you think that he can be like a top 10 fantasy quarterback?
Well, I don't think he's going to play the Colts every week, so I don't think so. But, I mean, he's a young guy, and the Rams kind of a young upstart team, so you never know. But, I mean, Sam Bradford, he was fantastic against the Saints. He was very efficient. I think he was 27 of 32. He had almost 400 yards. He was very good. I don't know if that's going to keep up the entire season, but, I mean, it's a good start.
I mean, Bradford had a great season last year with the Vikings, too. It seems like his career has kind of revived a little bit after an ACL injury. But, I mean, guys like Jared Goff, I mean, you touched on it. He's not going to play the Colts every week. Spoiler alert, he's not going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. I mean, it's his first really full season in this league. He's going to go up against tougher defenses. I think a guy like Alex Smith is someone that you need to watch out for. I mean, he had a big week 1 against the Patriots. He has something to prove this year. He is expecting not to be with the Chiefs next year because they have Patrick Mahomes waiting in the wings, going back to our quarterback conversation where you draft a guy, have him sit a little bit. Patrick Mahomes is that guy for the Chiefs next year. So, I mean, I feel like Alex Smith wants to have a really good season because he's not expecting to be with Kansas City next year. That way he can get paid by another team.
Yeah, and I want to stay on the topic of like Jared Goff and stay out west like in Los Angeles for a little bit because we're watching the games last weekend. No one was at the LA Coliseum. No one was at Levi's Stadium for the 49ers to watch a game. Do you think that fantasy football has an effect on people actually going to games and watching them? Would they rather just stay home and like watch Red Zone?
I think in part it has an impact, but I think fantasy football is part of this bigger entity that is just how far sports media has developed. You sit at home and watch the Red Zone, and it's the coolest experience ever, and you're just sitting there, and it's so easy. You can order buffalo wings, hang out with the boys, do whatever you want.
What we did last week.
Yeah, we just hung out. And it's just so easy for you now and so convenient when you're at home. It almost feels like it's a real game experience. So part of that, I guess, is keeping track of your fantasy team, but in general, I think it's just the whole experience is easier.
Yeah, and I mean now at games like during commercial breaks, I mean they're showing highlights of other games. They have tickers on like the little ribbon boards around the stadium.
They have a fantasy thing like set up at the game.
Yeah, I mean and you can track it on your phone as well. I mean it's literally everywhere. And then you got DraftKings thrown in there, which is kind of a new thing where you can get week-to-week fantasy players. So if you didn't do well one week, you can do good another week. So I mean it's gone to just extraordinary levels lately.
Well, do any of you guys play daily fantasy like DraftKings at all?
No.
No one gets involved in it?
Nope.
Way too overwhelming.
Yeah, I know. There's money there, but I just kind of like to stick to my own fantasy football. But, Josh, I actually have a question just for you because you're one of the few Seattle football fans that I know. It's kind of weird. I actually know 3 people who are from Seattle here. You wouldn't really expect that in the Midwest. But
that's okay.
They have an odd running back situation going on
do.
right now. They signed Eddie Lacy in the offseason to potentially come in and be their number 1 guy. They have Thomas Rawls coming off an injury, draft a rookie in Chris Carson, C.J. Prosise from Notre Dame, who's one of the best pass-catching backs in the NFL. I mean, I know that you watch all of Seattle's games, but what are your thoughts on how that running back situation might play out?
Well, if you're trying to find a running back for fantasy football from Seattle, I would just stay away from it because you don't really know who's going to start. Last week, it was Eddie Lacy against his old team, the Packers. Didn't really do much. Thomas Rawls was injured. C.J. Prosise, one of the best pass-catching running backs, he was just kind of okay. And then Chris Carson, he was actually kind of a surprise, a late-round draft pick, made the team, played well in the preseason. But I don't really know what to expect from these Seattle running backs, especially with Thomas Rawls coming back this week. Who's going to get the bulk of the carries? Is Eddie Lacy kind of the same running back he was a few years ago? He's definitely slimmed down a little bit. And can they run behind this offensive line? It's pretty tough to tell.
Yeah, I picked up Thomas Rawls, so I'm really hoping that he breaks out like he did a couple of years ago when Marshawn Lynch was out. But for me, I really love fantasy football because it's something that I do with all my buddies back home, and it keeps us together. And it's really just kind of like a bonding thing. When you leave to college and you have all your friends back in high school, the only way of communication that you have is either through text or if you want to call them or FaceTime. I don't know what you do. But for me and for all my friends back home, it's something that keeps us together. We play fantasy football, basketball, we do fantasy golf, we do everything. So I think fantasy sports is perfect for everyone. It's something to love, and it's something that you should embrace. Well, that does it for our show this week. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter and Facebook pages at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions you have for the show and ask any questions that you might have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. We'll see you next Sunday.